We're going to cover section R.2 on exponents. We'll first just run through definition of an exponent and then the rules of exponents and then some examples of how to apply them. So if we've got a real number, we'll call it A. And we have what we call an exponent, N. And we're going to say that N is an integer. Then if we take A with the power of N, that stands for taking A and multiplying it by itself N times. All right, so it's a shorthand way of multiplying one real number multiple times. Now, we can also take a variable x or any other variable and also apply an integer exponent to that, and that is multiplying that variable by itself n times. Okay, so let's look at some rules of exponents. So one that we'll start off with is the product rule. Which says if we have the same base multiplied together with different exponents, we can rewrite that with one base by adding those exponents. So let's look at an example. Let's take x squared times y squared times y cubed. Okay, well, there's only one base x, so we'll just keep that x squared by itself, but we can rewrite the y squared times y cubed as one base y, and we're going to add those exponents together, so we end up with x squared y to the fifth. Okay, next rule is the zero power rule. And that says if we have any base, we raise it to a power of 0, it equals 1. So it does not matter what that base is. It can be something really complicated like x squared plus y times x minus 4y squared. If we raise that to a power of 0, that whole thing is equal to 1. The next rule is the power rule, and that says if we have a base A raised to a power and then that whole quantity is raised to another power, so a to the n is inside parentheses and then that exponent of m applies to that whole thing, we can simplify that without parentheses by taking that base A and raising it to the product of the exponents. So we multiply the n and the m. So some examples here. If we take x squared times, in parentheses, y squared cubed, that exponent of the 3 only applies to the y squared. So the x squared is just going to stay like it is. But the y, we're going to write one single time without parentheses and multiply the exponent. So we end up with x squared y to the 6th. Another example, if that x squared is inside the parentheses with the y squared, we now are going to apply that exponent of the 3 outside the parentheses to both the x and the y. So we get x to the 2 times 3, so x to the 6th, and then y to the 2 times 3, so y to the 6th. Let's look at another example where we actually are going to have a fraction. Let's take 2x cubed over y squared, and then that whole thing has an exponent of 3. Well, that exponent of the 3 is going to apply to the numerator and the denominator. So we get 2x cubed over y squared cubed. All right, so simplifying that numerator, we get 2 cubed, which is 8. And then we take x to the 3 times 3. This is the power rule, so we're going to multiply. So we get x to the 9 over y to the 2 times 3, so we get y to the 6th. Let's look at just some other examples now where we're going to combine these different rules and look at them in a little bit different ways. Let's take -4 in parentheses squared times a -4 cubed. Now, because that -4 is inside parentheses, we're going to keep it in the parentheses, and we're multiplying that same base of -4, -4. So we're going to add the exponent, so that becomes -4 to the 5th. Okay, your textbook, when you do this in my math lab, it's going to ask you to leave it in that exponential form, so I'm just going to leave it like that. Now, look at another example that looks similar but is not the same. Let's take -4 squared. So here we want to think about the order of operations. So if we think back to order of operations, we got PEMDAS, so parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So here we have actually multiplication. That negative out in front is like a -1 times the 4 squared. So in our order of operation, the exponent comes first. So we are going to leave that -1. We're not going to do the multiplication yet, but we're going to do the squaring. So we get -1 times 16. So this is a -16. Now let's contrast that with if we started off with the -4 in parentheses and squared it. Now that that's the exponent of 2, it's like it is applying to that -1 that the 4 is multiplied by. So -1 squared is going to be a +1, okay, and then 4 squared is 16, so we get a +16. So the difference here is whether the negative is inside parentheses or it is not inside parentheses. Okay, let's look at another example. Let's take 3x squared to the 0 times 2y squared cubed. Okay, this first expression, doesn't matter what it is, has an exponent of 0, so that's going to equal 1. And then times, we've got to think about like taking that exponent of 3 that's on the outside and applying it to all the factors inside the parentheses, so we get 2 cubed, okay, which is 8, and then y squared cubed. So multiplying those, we're going to get y to the 6th. Okay, hopefully that will help you get going on the review from our review section point 2, the exponent part. There's lots of other examples in the textbook, and be sure to email me questions directly from MyLab Math if you have questions. All right, thanks.